I'm going to introduce the first speaker, and our first speaker today is Maurizio Del Poeta. And Maurizio is Stony Brook University on Long Island. He's going to talk about early antifungal development from target to startup. This is an area of his passion, and there's really no one better to talk about this than Maurizio. Thank you so much for being with us today, Maurizio.
Very welcome. I do have an interest at this time. I really hope it will become financial soon. I am affiliated with microgrid technology and also Novartis. I graduated in medicine in '92. I started the residency and I did fellowship in infection diseases at the University of Ancona. And I did some time in San Antonio to start the in vitro susceptibility testing in the fungal testing lab. I did an ID fellowship at Duke University with John Perfect. And that's when I was excited about doing research and start antifungal there. And John hired me for a research associate for 3-4 years. Then I met a lady there and I got married. So she moved to South Carolina. I moved to South Carolina and I went through the professorship there. And then I moved to Stony Brook because my wife moved to Stony Brook. So I had to follow her. And a few years ago, we co-founded the microgrid technology. And I will tell you a little more about this. I study mechanism of fungal pathogenicity and particularly on lipid pathway and on sphingolipid and glycolipids. And we also study host susceptibility to fungal infection, particularly on sphingomyelin synthase, sphingonicanase 1, sphingosine-1 phosphate. But the talk today is about antifungal development. And we have 3 projects. One is going after the vesicular trafficking, and this is going after fungal glucosylceramide, the sphingosine synthesis. We have another, this is the most advanced program. We have 2 additional programs, which is targeting specifically CEL1 and SGL1, which are 2 fungal specific enzymes, but we are not talking about this program. Although the company, microgrid technology, is involved in all these antifungal programs. This is a collaboration between microgrid technology, the Center of Biotechnology, my department, microbiology. We are fortunate here at Stony Brook to have an Institute of Chemical Biology, Drug Discovery for MedChem. And the collaborative effort is with the FDL in San Antonio and the University of Cincinnati for some PK study we do there. And with Fiocruz, because Fiocruz is interested in veterinary use of our compound. A few years ago, we discovered a new class of compound called acylhydrazone that has this peculiar phenotype. It decreases the synthesis of a certain type of sphingolipid called glucosylceramide that you see here on a TLC. And a TLC is a thin layer chromatography, it's a pulse-chase labeling in which you are able to visualize a certain type of lipid. In this particular type of TLC, you're visualizing sphingolipid. And you can see that there is a decrease of certain type of sphingolipids and an increase of certain type of sphingolipid called sphingosine. What happened is that this type of sphingolipid, particularly sphingosine, is extremely toxic to fungal cell. And therefore, when you are increasing these sphingolipids, the cell are dying. And this was demonstrated by a pulse chase labeling and also steady state labeling using mass spectrometry. And so we started a big program and that are looking at combinatorial strategy. These are small molecules, and we look at the different synthesis and different possibility to create a much better molecule than the one that we are screened from the synthetic library, which were done using the Cambridge library. And at the end of the SARA screening, at the end of the combinatorial chemistry, we screen about 400, 450 compounds. And here is the flow screen that we use, minimal inhibitory concentration, the killing activity, the toxicity in mammalian cells. And I would like to point out that we were extremely stringent with our assay, looking at a selectivity index greater than 500. These are small molecules which might be toxic, so you really want a very big therapeutic window. anyhow, at the end of this, we end up to have a 5 representative compound that has a very, very good activity in vitro, in vivo. They have a very good PK and not much toxicity at least in animals and mammalian cells. And so when we had these, there's a question of whether or not you want to start a company, and how do you go from a target, from either your product or even from your idea to a startup. And one possibility that you can do is just to go online and just type from idea to startup. You can see that there is many possibilities there to learn a little more. What does it take? And if you try to read the certain types of document, you will see that there is a different type of startup, and an LLC, or limited liability company, doing business as, or a corporation, and whether or not you're going to go with an S corporation, with a C corporation. I will be happy to elaborate this later. But anyhow, online, I will give you a lot of information, but also a lot of confusion. You may have a 36, 35 steps to form a startup. Some other will tell you that you can do it in 13 steps. Some other will tell you in 12 steps, and some other will tell you in 9 easy steps. And I can tell you that if there is anything about these things, that they're not easy. But I decided to go and talk to 2 charming faculty that in my department, because they had a startup. So one was Eckhart Wimmer, and the other one was Sumita Baduri McIntosh, and they had Codogenic and Ocus Locus. You can go online and see what they do. But they told me, you know, Maurizio, I think the first thing you do is you should go to talk to the New York Center for Biotechnology. And I said, wow, that's nice. I said, where is the Center of Biotechnology? Do I have to go to Albany or to New York City? And they said, no, it's just behind your building. So what it turned out is that the Center of Biotechnology for the entire state of New York is located on Stony Brook campus, and it's really behind my building. And so they have a Long Island Science Incubator right here on campus. And I learned that this center already helped over 40 companies during the last 15 years to start up here from Stony Brook University. And they already put several drugs in the market, and particularly a lot of devices for orthodontics. So, and they also have a program of bioentrepreneur in residency, in which there are people that are helping the faculty to start up a company. And so I decided to give her a call, and I met with Lee Leo, which is now a director of business development in a company. He's not working here at Stony Brook anymore. But I met with him, and I told him who I was, and I told him what we were thinking to do. And he gave me a paper to read. And he said, it was really nice to meet you last week. Please find attached a paper that discussed about faculty involvement in entrepreneurship. And happy to discuss further if you have any questions. So I immediately, obviously, read this paper. And this paper was about how much risk are you prepared to take? And it's a Nature paper published by Van Dyke. And he's talking about any faculty member wishing to commercialize the discovery of technology should contemplate the pros and cons of pursuing entrepreneurship route or license it to an outside entity. And basically, the paper is talking about the 5 P's that you must have. These are the people, the patent, the papers, the preliminary data, and the funding. Believe it or not, this is actually the importance of how you should start thinking. The funding is not the first important thing. You know, people think that the money are the first important, but it's actually not. Because if you have the people, if you have a patent, if you have a paper, the preliminary data, the funding eventually will come. The people is absolutely so essential. The meeting, the stature that you have to develop this startup is absolutely essential. If you don't have a patent, there is no way you cannot sell something that you don't have, you don't own. The paper is more about what kind of stature you have in the field, more than a specific paper about the product. That is in the preliminary data, which obviously is to be strong. If you want to sell something and you want to propose something, is to be definitely better than something that is already out there. And if you have this one, you know, the funding eventually will come. And so I read the paper, I decided to give it a call to Lee again, and they had a meeting with me to talk about more about the startup. And at the meeting, I asked a question. I said, you know, it's funny that there is no disease. And they look each other and they look at me. And I remember one guy said to another guy, I said, yeah, this guy needs some business training. And then they left the room. And so I was left there with Lee, and he told me, don't worry, Maurizio, we're gonna talk about this. But apparently, in some cases, I mean, in many cases, disease is not needed. I will be happy to elaborate this a little later if you want to. But obviously, this is not true for the other drug that we have. But and so what we decided to do is a key important step that they asked me to do is to definitely decide my role in this startup. So you can have a role in which you can be just a consultant, but in my case, I really wanted to be a little more involved in the formation of a startup. So I really wanted to be a guy that produced the data, the science, because that's what I do. And so I decided to be a chief scientific officer. And then they asked me a question whether I wanted to be a founder or or not a founder. And there is a difference between that, because if you want to be a co-founder, then you own the share of a company. Whereas if you don't want to be a founder, then you don't need to be the share of a company. But if you want to be more in control of a company, a co-founder is definitely a way to go. The last thing that you want is to have somebody coming, get your product and sell it to someone else. So we decided to select the CEO, and to select the CEO, they asked me to first define very, very clearly the goal that I wanted to have, and really to write down a strategic plan, which is something that we did. And so together with the Lilio and together with the Office of Technology and Industry Relations at Stony Brook University, we decided to interview the bio-entrepreneur in residence that was here at the Center of Biotechnology. And we selected Brian McCarty because Brian McCarty, and we interviewed three or four people. We selected Brian McCarty because Brian McCarty was coming with John Malamo. And John Malamo has 30 years of experience in industry relationship, and he was the vice president for drug discovery at Cephalon, who then was acquired by Teva Pharmaceutical, and he's still working for Teva Pharmaceutical as a consultant. And so John Malamo has a very large experience in bringing a drug into the market. He brought about 15, 20 drugs into the market. So that was very good for us to have John on board. And so the next thing that we wanted to do is to have a stockholder agreement. And this is important for a foundation of a startup company. If you want to be a co-founder, you really need to be in a position in which you own some share of the company. And this is very important because if you don't have this, then the CEO or who holds the share can sell the company anytime you want, anytime they want. And this stockholder agreement also is something that needs to be evaluated by a lawyer. The lawyer needs to look at this to see whether or not it makes sense to have this kind of agreement. Other agreement that needs to be in place, something that I have to become more familiar, was a collaborative agreement between microread and SBU or any other entity, because I am a faculty, and as a faculty, I need to disclose as a state employee everything I do for the company. So there is a management plan between me and the university that allowed me to do industry work. I cannot work, for instance, more than 20% of my time for microread. I need to become familiar with what means a material transfer agreement, with the confidential disclosure agreement, a non-disclosure agreement, confidential agreement, dual data user agreement, data transfer agreement, subcontract agreement, sponsor research agreement, collaborative agreement, consortium agreement, consulting agreement. So you really need to be familiar with a lot of agreements about this issue. Conflict of interest and the management plan is in place between me, Stony Brook, and Michael Reed, so that I can do whatever I have to do. Clearly, there is a lot of keeping record of everything that needs to be done between a faculty. Again, this is particularly in my case because I am a co-founder and the chief scientific officer. If you want just to be a consultant, you don't need to do all of these things. The IP, a provisional disclosure of a patent, is absolutely essential because there is nothing that you can say or you can disclose without prior disclosing this to your patent office at your institution. It's a big mistake to disclose anything that you do with the company before disclosing to your patent office. And so I have to become familiar with the key topics that are different than normal, particularly on drug development and particularly on grant development. Instead of background significance for grant, for instance, there is what is the need for your product, what is your proposed solution, why this product is different than the current standard of care, what are the team, what is your project plan, what is the commercialization plan. Even if it's early, you need to be able to understand the value, expected outcome and income. I remember that I gave a talk at the Life Science Summit here in New York, and when I was telling that the drug was killing the fungus in 3 hours, the guy stand up and said, "This is not good. This is not good because it's killing too fast. How long do you think you can get the therapy? If a therapy is only for 1 or 2 days, we don't make enough money." So this kind of question, you may have this kind of question. You need to be prepared how to answer this kind of question. A too good drug might be not business potential. You really need to have some IP protection again, production and marketing plan, revenue stream is very important if this is a business. Transition plan and regulatory path, potential risks and mitigation, this is similar to other type of grant, timeline, milestone, funding requirements, budget justification has to be very detailed because this type of grant for commercial, for business grant are normally require a detailed budget and not a modular budget, such as when you're applying for a classical R01 or something. For microread technologies currently on the preclinical development of the acyl hydrazone, and we hope that during the next 12 months, we are finish up our preclinical portfolio to be submitted for the FDA for IND. And we are working very heavy now on the target product profile, particularly on the type of formulation. We have an IV formulation, we have an oral formulation. We are developing now a topical formulation. And we are engaging with the strategic partner for development based upon a value proposition, which is currently superior to the standard of care. And this is where we are at this time. So I would say pros and cons to start a startup. If you really go and analyze the pros and cons, the cons are really a lot. There are many, and I would say you're not going to do it. I would say, do you really have a passion and excitement to do this? This is something totally different. This is something personal also, and it gives you opportunity to learn to something different. It makes you also a little more creative. You are more independent. You will add a lot of responsibility. Talk to your wife or your husband first. But I think that you will be able also to do a lot of different things that, you hang out with a lot of people that will have a lot of more money than you. That's for sure. And I will suggest to go and talk to any other people that has a startup. There is a center for biotechnology in every state. So that's something that you can reach out for suggestion. I will say, a basic understanding on IP, COI, and agreement is absolutely a must before doing anything. And definitely you need to be prepared to do a lot of fundraising, because to advance your idea, to advance this type of idea, you really need to convince a lot of people that it's really worth to spend a lot of money. So fundraising is really, really important. And so I will conclude by remembering Mike Rinaldi, because I started this antifungal development in his lab, and I just want to say that ciao paisano. This is my group, Stony Brook, and we have several people working on mechanism of action, formulation, and development. Iwa Ojima here is the director of the Institute of Chemical Biology. Nathan is helping at FTL for some study, and Melanin and Pankaj at the University of Cincinnati for PK. We have this collaboration with the University of Rio de Janeiro and Fiocruz, again, for veterinary use of our drug. And obviously, I would like to thank Michael Reed, Brian, and John for their support throughout the years. This is something that I started a few years ago and is going very well so far. And the funding that comes from the REACH program here and the NIH R1, R41, CTR, and the DoD funding for this antifungal development, which is very generous. And I also would like to thank for this, for you guys participating in this, and I would like to thank again Peter for inviting me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Maurizio. Very, very interesting perspective. We don't, get that a lot from our investigators. And so we'll open this up for discussion. We have about 7 or 8 minutes for questions or comments. I'd like to ask 2 questions just to kind of get us started. Number one, when one starts up a company like this, and especially when you're talking about, small markets and so forth, is the ultimate goal to get bought up by another larger entity, a deep pockets entity? I mean, is that really where the investment pays off? Is that
Yes.
Is that the ultimate goal of those who develop these small startups?
Yes. So, for the state of New York is fantastic. We have Alexandria Center here at New York City. It's the place where we are exposed as a small company to big company. And once a year, we have this meeting with them and say, which of these products are they willing to go forward. And you are definitely absorbed by them. Either you are selling to them, you may find enough support to say, hey, I have a $50 million, $70 million investor that's coming in to do a clinical trial with you. Yeah, then you can do it. But if it doesn't, look what happened with Amplix, for instance. Merck eventually, Pfizer eventually came in. And in my opinion, it's very extremely difficult that we will be able to commercialize this compound. Eventually, we will have to sell to a bigger company, which is fine.
Yep. Okay. And the other thing that came to mind, you mentioned that one of your compounds, or one of the compounds you were looking at, you suggested that it worked too well, killed fungus too fast, and that it limited its commercial value because it wasn't going to be given for multiple days. Were you being tongue in cheek, or was that a real consideration?
No, it's a real consideration. Yeah.
Interesting. I think most people in the pharmaceutical industry would just adjust the price to accommodate that. But anyway, let's see if there are any questions in the chat. There are a couple of comments.
Yeah, I see that there is a comment about NIAID. NIAID was extremely supportive. But for instance, the study that we have done with San Antonio was through NIAID. NIAID has some subcontracts sometimes. So if you have a compound that you want to be tested, and you can reach out to a program officer, and you have to submit a proposal, and if approved, the program officer can subcontract an entity. In our case was FTL for this testing for us. I know that Dana is connected right now, so maybe she can elaborate a little more. But that's something that we have done with several of our compounds throughout the years. And so, I think, yes.
Hi, Maurizio. I think Erin Zaytouni, our preclinical services manager, is online, and we could upload something, or we don't want to take up much time, but we do encourage folks to reach out to us. These are in-kind services, free services, and it doesn't take a year to review to find an answer whether you're going to get support or not.
Yes, absolutely. So we have used this service a couple of times.
John Rex also mentioned that there's the California Life Science Institute that's also an accelerator for support and development. There was a question from Abyssine. How do you gauge and set up a safety net from any legal liability when considering being a co-founder versus solely a consultancy role? So, a matter of ultimately responsibility, I suppose, is really kind of what it boils down to. Yes.
So it's a key to talk to your patent office and industry's relationship. You need to know exactly what, and this is different from university to university. In my case, for instance, the state university, I am bound to do certain types of plan and certain types of things that other people in another university may not be able to do so. So it is something that your office is going to tell you what you can and what you can do. So it's absolutely essential. And this has to be done before doing any type of agreement with your outside entity. Otherwise, your university may say, you cannot be a co-founder. You just cannot. You cannot hold any share. And if they won't allow that, there is nothing you can do. It's a breach of your agreement with the university. I like it because in the state of New York, this is possible. And because of the Center about Technologies here, maybe it's possible. I don't know about that. But, when I ask this question about whether or not I can be a stockholder, they said yes. And this came out with the lawyer, because the lawyer said, Maurizio, why you want to give away everything? Some type of yeah. That was really funny, by the way. When I contacted the lawyer told me, the first 30 minutes is free. The next hour is $1,200 an hour. I said, you gotta be kidding me. There's no way I'm gonna pay that. Don't worry, we're gonna solve this in 20 minutes. Okay, then. So, but the point is that it's really essential that you have a say whether or not about what you have done, because otherwise you're gonna give it away, and a CEO may come in and say, "I sell it," and there is nothing you can say.
Maurizio, I want to thank you again, and I think we'll move on to our next speaker. There are a couple of comments that are worth looking at in the chat box, and I would encourage you to pursue some of these references.